Hi, this is Debbie and thank you for joining me today. I've got two cards to share which use Rubbernecker stamps. These stamps use a simple multi-step stamping technique to give beautiful watercoloured looks to your cards. I've gathered my supplies and from the Rubbernecker line I'm going to be using the Bunch of Tulips set and the Field of Poppies set. I've also got a bunch of watercolour card already pre-cut, and I'm going to be using some Simon Says Stamp dye inks and some distress inks as well. For ease, I've pre-cut some watercolour card down to 3.5 by 5 inches. Later on I'm going to be die cutting this with a stitch rectangle die, so this is actually going to get slightly smaller, but to start with I started with the 3.5 by 5 inch size, and I'm blending in some of the Simon Says Stamp dye inks. These inks blend beautifully. I'm using the mini blender tool from Ranger, and I'm slowly bringing in some sea glass, and then I'm also bringing in some melon and cotton candy. And I think this melon and cotton candy gives that lovely early morning light type of look, you know, the sort of soft pinky peachy look that you can get with an early morning light as the sun's just rising. I was thinking of using my Misty stamping tool to align these stamps. However, having watched a Rubbernecker video, I realised how easy they are to align. You lay the image onto the pre-printed guide sheet that comes with the stamps, and then align your acrylic block with the edges of the pre-printed sheet. And then when you come to your stamping, you then just line your acrylic block up with the edges of your paper. And this gives really good results. The Bunch of Tulips set comes with 3 images, a base layer of leaves, detailed leaves, and the flowers themselves. For the base layer of leaves, I wanted these to appear as if they were in the background, and so I inked them in paler colours to give that impression. I used scatter straw distress ink and a little peeled paint distress ink down one side. And then I spritzed it with a mini mister to get those inks moving. It was about 3 spritz, I think, and then using the acrylic block to align the stamping onto my card. The distress inks had blended beautifully and given a great stamped image. However, at the moment I just adore watercolouring, and so seeing all that lovely wet ink on my paper, I couldn't help but get out my Gansey Tambi paints to add a little more detail into some of the leaves. And while the paper's wet, the inks and the paints will softly blend together. I don't want my next layer of stamping to blend into the base layer, and so I'm drying that off with my heat tool, although you could leave it to dry naturally. For the next layer, this is the detailed leaves, and I'm going to start with some scattered straw on the tips, but then I want to bring in some more depth so that these will stand out from the base layer of leaves. So I'm adding the peeled paint again, but more of it this time, and then also some forest moss to really deepen up the colours. Again, I'm going to spritz that with a mini mister, and then I'm going to use a combination of seeing where the base layer of leaves are and also aligning the edge of my card with my acrylic block to stamp down the detailed leaves on top of the base layer. I'm going back in with some of the paints again, adding more detail and depth. You really don't need to add that step, however, I'm just really enjoying watercolouring at the moment. Having dried this second layer, it's now time to move on to the flowers, and I'm using one lipstick as the base layer and then adding in some depth with festive berries and seedless preserves. That's the advantage of these mini distress ink cubes, is that you can really add tiny touches of ink to an image. And as far as the colours are concerned, I really liked the look of the guide sheet that came with the stamps, and so I was using that as inspiration for the colours I was picking. I think the alignment technique from Rubbernecker stamps was quick, easy and pretty much spot on. However, this is a very relaxed style of stamps. The images are very loose, and therefore I don't think it would really matter if they weren't perfectly aligned. And this perhaps is more so in the next card I'll show you later with the Field of Poppies stamp set, where you've got an outline image and you could try and align that exactly over the flower petals. However, I actually think it looks a little bit more artistic if it's slightly offset. Along with watercolouring, splattering backgrounds are also a big favourite of mine at the moment. I've taken some of the pool colour from the Gansey Tambi paint set along with some of the yellows and oranges and got the right consistency of paint with a small paintbrush and then tapped that splatters over the card base. Another staple at the moment is the solution of perfect pearls in a mini mister, giving that a good shake to mix the powder and the water together, and then using the tube that comes in the mini mister to splatter over the background. Gosh, this is very splattery, but for the final touches I added some Heidi Swap Colour Shine in Gold. I'm going to cut the Blessed die from Simon Says Stamp with some die cuts with a View glitter card and running that through my Big Shot machine, and while I'm die cutting I'm also going to cut the now dry panel along with a stitch rectangle die. I've wrapped a twine bow around the panel before attaching the Blessed die with some multi-medium in matte, and this means that if any of the glue squidges out then it won't be visible once it's dried. I've added lots of foam adhesive to the back of the panel and then attaching that to a top folding card base. The final touch is to add some sequins, again with multi-medium and matte. And that completes this card. I love how these stamps enable me to get a freehand watercolour look without actually being able to freehand watercolour. For my second card, I've already blended in the Samsys stamp die inks into some watercolour card. This time I'm going to have the pinky peach corner down in the left, as if it's giving a glow to the back of the flowers. This Field of Poppy set comes with 2 images, the petals and then an outline of the petals along with the stems. I've inked the petals with a combination of mustard seed and wild honey, spritz that with my mini mister and then use the edge of the acrylic block to align that with my watercolour card. Again, while the distress inks are still wet, I'm bringing in some depth of colour with some Gansey Tambi paints, and also using the guide sheet as more inspiration, I'm bringing in some green into the base of the flowers. Having dried the panel, it's now time to stamp the outline image, and for that I'm going to use VersaFine Onyx Black ink. This is a great ink for fine detail images, but also once dry it's waterproof, so therefore you can go back in if you so wish and add more details to your watercoloured image. Having said that, once dry, I thought that the green at the base of the flowers had lost some of its vibrancy, so I did go back in and add just a second layer of the green. I finished this card in the same way as the first one by adding splatters, a twine bow and the Blessed Die Cut sentiment from Gold Glitter card. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I hope you've enjoyed seeing how to align Rubbernecker stamps to give a beautiful freehand watercolour look to your projects.